podcast. My name is Jason Arriola, and joining me today is
Just call me Joe.
Joe. All right, that'll work, buddy. All right, so Joe, today we're going to be covering another Metal Gear game here. This one is Metal Gear Ghost. Is it Babel or Babel? I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Well, Tower of Babel makes more sense, but I guess that kind of thing. I think I say Babel, but I don't know. I think it's either way.
Yeah.
But let's look up the Japanese spelling. I'm going to go look this up.
So Ghost Babel, however you want to pronounce it. This is the Game Boy Color entry in the series, which is just an odd choice, I think, for this series. It ended up coming out in early to mid 2000, which was kind of the tail end of the Game Boy Color, or just the Game Boy's lifespan in general. I think the Game Boy Advance may have even been out at that point, but this came out, of course, after Metal Gear Solid and came out before Metal Gear Solid 2, so it's in this weird area of, as far as canonical stuff goes, it's just a Gaiden. It doesn't really fit into the timeline anywhere whatsoever, but I guess similarity-wise, it's going to be closer to, like, Metal Gear 2 or the original Metal Gear on the MSX as far as, like, look and aesthetic goes. It does its best to kind of emulate the Metal Gear Solid experience on a Game Boy Color, and I think it does it pretty admirably. I mean, of course, we'll get into that. But this game in general is almost a bit of a technical marvel, the fact that they got it on the Game Boy Color and working as well as it did. They did have to split it up into stages effectively, just to, I guess, kind of deal with the hardware limitations of the Game Boy Color. And I think this is one of the very few Game Boy Color exclusive games. I mean, of course, you had some like junky ass ports of, kid games or whatever the hell at the end of the thing's life cycle, but this is one of the few Game Boy Color exclusive games of note.
This, and well, I guess there was Shantae too, but this was probably, this is the one that people actually bought. It's fantastic looking. Game Boy Color games, if you haven't played them, they kind of have this chunky look to them. I guess that was just the way that the sprites worked, but they all kind of had this weird, I guess, I'd actually have to look into it and see what the color limitations are. But most of the time when you would see something, that you would see different shades, like, for instance, of black. And you can kind of notice this in the beginning of this, where they kind of shift colors, and it would just kind of have this weird, janky look to it. But yeah, it looks fantastic. They have excellent animations on the characters. It's really cool because you have these very tiny, intricate characters, and they're really well animated. They're actually animated quite a bit better than in the original games, but they're about the same scale. So I guess just for reference. But like Jason said, this is just a really impressive looking and performing game for something that was real limited. And back then, a portable game was usually a very limited version of a console game. And this, it is a limited game compared to the original, but at the same time, it carries over the gameplay mechanics and just kind of the old overall experience. They even managed to get in some of the cinematic aspects of it.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that. Like, I was not really expecting to walk into, I guess, what I did with this game, and it's held up remarkably well, I think. I mean, of course, we're going to get into that towards the end here, but I mean, just seeing how much they pulled out of the Game Boy Color hardware to recreate a Metal Gear experience is just, yeah, it's a technical marvel that they managed to do what they did with this thing at all. I mean, it really does kind of speak to whoever, like, programmed this thing is just, just brilliance on their end. Because, I mean, if you had told me, like, that this thing was playable at all and played anything remarkably similar to a Metal Gear game, I would have called you nuts on a Game Boy Color game until I, played this thing recently. So, of course, there's some limitations too, not just on the, like, hardware specifications and technical aspects of it, but there's also the limitations of the buttons. There's a D-pad and effectively 4 buttons, and I think they did a very good job of using basically everything the Game Boy had to work with as far as buttons. I mean, you had a start, select, and a B and an A button. I mean, they didn't have the shoulder buttons at the time, and they kind of remarkably, like, figured out a control scheme that felt pretty much like Metal Gear, which like I said, considering the limitations of what they were dealing with, was just impressive. I don't want to say this is definitely, I think, top tier Game Boy Color game, but I would put this in the top tier of the system, which I don't know, might be damning with faint praise because as far as Game Boy Color games, there's not a whole lot, and I think if you go back to a lot of Game Boy games, a lot of them don't hold up. But I mean, this is one that I don't feel weird about recommending to people who have, might have a little bit less affinity for the Game Boy era than you or I would. Did you ever get that pronunciation thing figured out? Or?
Well, according to the Japanese, it's Babel. So we could say Babel. We'll just I'll learn to say it that way. So just for consistency's sake.
Oh, it's no big deal.
So.
If you slip into Babel, I'll probably, honestly, I'm probably gonna slip into Babel just because it's been in my head as Babel for so long. And I think there's a reference to, or not a reference, but I mean, sort of some of the plot stuff kind of references the Tower of Babel. So I think maybe that's what they were going for with that. And honestly, I can't think of like what Babel would be anyway. So
yeah,
unless they're referring to Chris as a babe, I don't know. But
I just kept laughing because of Kris Jenner. Different spelling, but
yeah, oddly similar to what's going on today. So yeah. Now, as far as like the development behind this game, if I'm remembering correctly, this basically, I think it may have been the European division of Konami wanted some kind of Metal Gear game on the Game Boy. As far as why, I don't know, but they wanted to put something out on the Game Boy, and I guess Konami Japan was just like, sure, let's make this thing happen. Kojima's involvement in this, I don't know how extensive it was. I mean, there's a bunch of credits on here, but he's listed mostly as just the producer, which may just be like an honorific thing for him. Like, it's like, hey, this is Metal Gear, put my name on it, basically. So, especially after the whole Metal Gear 2 Snake's Revenge in the US. So,
Snake's Revenge is kind of a alternate take on what happened after Metal Gear, and this is kind of an alternate take of what happened after Metal Gear 2. I guess the alternate to Metal Gear Solid. So you have some of the same characters, but they've just met for the first time. They're interacting for the first time. So like Campbell and Mei Ling are in this game, but it's not like they've met Snake before. It's kind of retelling some of that first part of the game. So
yeah, well, where Mei Ling in Solid, she's already graduated from, I think it's MIT. She's still in MIT. She's still in school in this game, so it's like, and that's kind of weird that they pulled a literal college student out to do this top secret black ops mission here. I don't know what the rationale behind that would have been, but yeah, there's some crazy kind of concessions here as far as reusing characters, because this, like we said, this is a guide and it doesn't really have any effect on the Metal Gear timeline, as wonky as that can be anyway. But Campbell and Snake are sort of reunited in this thing, or is this their first meeting? I don't.
No, this is the second meeting after after Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. So
that's right. Yeah. So this is their,
and they do refer to that. So they do refer to that having happened. He obviously killed Big Boss. He took down Outer Heaven and Zanzibar Land and all that. So
and committed patricide, as he found out.
Yes.
So, yeah, which is a weird thing they keep bringing up in this game. So this takes place 7 years after Outer Heaven Uprising, and of course I'm getting this from the the infinitely accurate internet database of Wikipedia. Basically this new so this came up 7 years after Outer Heaven. New Metal Gear has been stolen by separatist guerrilla group. Oh god, I don't know how you pronounce that. Gindra in Central Africa.
I believe it's Ginja. Gindra. Yeah.
Gindra. Okay, so we'll go with that. So the Gindra Liberation Front has stolen the this Metal Gear. Basically, they want to achieve independence from. That's a weird, like, the kind of thing in this whole game. It sort of like kind of comes back to like colonialism and stuff like that too. There's always some weird underlying theme in Metal Gear games, and I think this one's like is colonialism. I mean, I know we talked about on the last one, like the first one is what is it? There's that Gene, and then the second one is Meme, and then the third one is Scene. Am I remembering that
Scene,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, and this one doesn't fit in the rhyming scheme, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, unless you can figure out a way to shorten colonialism into that. So yeah, but he's come out of retirement. It just seems like they're always dragging his poor corpse out of retirement for to take out Black Chamber. There, take out Black Chamber, and yeah, basically he's set to infiltrate what is effectively Outer Heaven once again. So this is a little bit of weird revisiting of Metal Gear 2. And if you've never actually played Metal Gear 2, like I haven't, this is your kind of your first introduction to the events that took place there. I'm sure for a lot of people who got into the series like in Metal Gear Solid like I did, this is sort of that point in the game where you're like, oh wow, I'm revisiting stuff or visiting stuff that has been alluded to but I've never seen before. So
Right.
it's a nifty little thing, but. Some of the people that worked on this game ended up moving or working on the Metal Gear Acid games and the Boktai game that came out for the Game Boy Advance. The infamous game that no longer really works to a point. Or actually, no. I mean, I don't know if that like solar thing would work anymore. But I mean, I think if you plug it into a DS, which is or even the GBASP, I don't think it really works very well. I think this sensor's at the top, and then with the SP's port on the bottom, it doesn't really pick up sunlight very well. So unless you're playing like on your back in the grass or something, it's a little bit tough of a game to go through. And because of that thing, I think it's a little tougher to emulate. Although I'm sure there's some trick to being able to get around that. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So
yeah, I haven't tried that on there. It was actually really hard to play anyway because of you did have to have direct sunlight, and the problem is that, and they were trying to solve the issue with the Game Boy Advance's screen and having to have light. The problem is when you're outside, you can barely see the damn thing, so
yeah.
it didn't work out so great. So
yeah, I have some very fond memories, or not fond memories, I suppose, of angling myself very uncomfortably in bed trying to play the Game Boy Advance. So I remember being on a flight and like sitting directly underneath a light, like sitting there kind of like angling, and every time like we would hit a little bit of turbulence, it'd be like, oh god, I lost my angle. So I'd sit there for a minute or two trying to find the angle. And imagine sitting nearly cross country trying to hold a Game Boy Advance in an exact position so you can see the bloody thing. Yeah, I mean that system had its own issues. But anyway, so let's get back onto Metal Gear. This game starts out sort of the same way that or same way Metal Gear Solid does, with a bunch of sort of cutscene-esque things where everyone, I don't know if you picked up on this, but it seems like everyone's got a certain color scheme. Like Roy Campbell's kind of like green and gray, which is really weird. I don't know. I mentioned this offline. It looks like somebody took Campbell's face and just dunked it in ash. It's really kind of freaky looking when you look at it close enough. It's I don't know. It's very odd, but everyone's kind of got their own color scheme. I think Mei Ling's is kind of like purplish. Snake's is blue, as he just his outfit is always blue, which I never really thought made a whole lot of sense. You would think like gray maybe would be a bit better rather than a blue, but whatever. After you're done with the introduction thing that you can skip, I mean, I think that thing lasts like 5 minutes if you let it sit long enough too. You will jump out of the airplane and do a what is it, a halo?
Halo jump, yeah.
Yeah, halo jump. You don't really see any of the halo jump. The scene that as close as you can see to the scene of it, the back end of the plane opens up, and you don't even see like Snake jump out. It's just the back of the plane opens up, and the next thing you kind of land in outside of outer heaven. I think, if I'm remembering right, like he said, like 3 kilometers or something out of it. So
And it's kind of funny because in the NES or the Famicom version of Metal Gear, that's how he got in the first place. He jumped into the jungles and then infiltrated that way. In the MSX version, he kind of swam in and then climbed out of like a river or something like that and got into there. So,
oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
but there's a lot of kind of the transition, I guess it's kind of similar. This is it's a little bit like the beginning of the NES game because you actually started in the jungle and then you made your way to the buildings rather than starting in the facility. So there was actually a different entryway that he took basically between those two versions. And then it's kind of like in Snake's Revenge too, where he started out in a jungle and then had to make his way into a facility, kind of taking advantage of people not locking the door. So there's a lot of little things. I don't know that that was intentional, but I don't think so. But there are some kind of similarities between the stage. And actually, if you look at the overall game, there's a lot of similarities between how they progress and how Metal Gear Solid progressed and how the MSX games progressed. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities in almost all of the games. They all kind of follow a very loose structure of sorts. It's almost like kind of like every Zelda has a certain structure. Well, not everyone, but most of the mainline Zeldas follow the same structure that was set by A Link to the Past. I think Metal Gear sort of like references itself from the very beginning. I'm not too familiar with the original Metal Gear. Is it kind of structured the same way as all the other entries in the series?
more or less, you infiltrate, you get shit, you get at some point you. I'll say I'm trying to think of how they usually go, but anyway, there's always something where he gets captured, he gets put in jail, he has to remove something that they put in his crap when he gets it back.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that.
There's usually kind of a boss before the last boss, and then there's a final battle. And Metal Gear Solid pretty much follows the progression and story beats, like things like somebody's a traitor or somebody you knew has been resurrected as a cyborg ninja, because that actually happened in Metal Gear 2 first. There's the whole thing where he fights Gray Fox in a minefield. Well, shirtless in a minefield. Well, he fought, Liquid Snake. The thing is, though, that like Liquid Snake basically took up like 3 or 4 boss fights, basically, that would have been multiple other characters in the prior games. So it's kind of interesting. So
yeah, Liquid had that thing of just keep coming back for more. It doesn't matter what you did to him. So
yeah, he was just basically like the Terminator.
Yeah. So the thing I kind of like about this opening sequence is you're sneaking through the jungle and you're introduced to some stuff that doesn't really come back. And that's one of the, I think, this game's strengths is it uses some stuff that they don't really use again. I mean, it gives you a lot of inventive ways to kind of go through and sneak around. There's the guards you can just sneak around. It brings back the trucks from I think the first 2 games that you can go into and find items and ammo and stuff like that. Even though initially, like, you can't. I mean, I guess throughout the game, you really can't. It doesn't seem like you can carry very much ammo. Like, I was constantly being told, "Hey, all your pouches are full." I'm like, oh god, okay. And I always had a hard time differentiating any sort of item on the ground. Like, there's some color differences to them, but like in my head, I couldn't really ever keep it straight. Like, so I just went for every box basically. One of the cool mechanics I thought was that you can like hide in mud and hide in like tall grass to evade some of the soldiers. And I mean, that's something that wasn't used in Metal Gear until Metal Gear Solid 3. So I don't know if like that was an idea that they saw from this game.
You could actually you could in Metal Gear 2 actually.
Oh, could you? Okay. Man,
Yeah.
that game was way ahead of its time.
It was That's the thing. I'm really impressed by how much they were able to put into that. But like things like the walking over a certain type of ground would make noise and alert soldiers. That started in that, you know, leaving the footprints, things along those lines. It's really super advanced, and I think it's held up really well. I know a lot of people have a hard time playing it, but and I can understand. I mean, the gameplay itself hasn't aged as well, but there's a lot of when you kind of step back and look at it, it's just like really impressive. And this is pretty like not as impressive, but it's still incredibly impressive what they were able to cram into this game as far as the content and everything. So
Yeah, I think if you're gonna recommend like an old Metal Gear to kind of get a sense of like what the series was, I think this might be a good like entry point because it feels
yeah,
it has some of the it has some modern conveniences, I suppose, compared to the original two Metal Gears, and it seems to take a lot of that advanced thinking that the series didn't even, like I said, didn't even adopt until Metal Gear Solid 3, but Metal Gear 2 had. So I think this is kind of a nice like I guess middle ground in between what Metal Gear Solid would become and then what Metal Gear originally was, with a little bit more playability, I suppose. And like I said, this is kind of a nifty little area where you're introduced to like just I don't want to say a variety of environments that you're going to be sneaking around in, but I mean, there's so much of this stuff that they don't really reuse. And I don't know. I was really impressed going through this. I mean, there's even the dogs that you can like the dogs like their line of sight's just as good as the soldiers, but they can also smell you. So like hiding and stuff doesn't really work out very well for you either because they'll still smell you out. So and some of the soldiers in this thing they're dumb. I mean, compared to even like in the original or in Metal Gear Solid, like the soldiers in there are just I mean they're not the greatest, but they won't give up entirely after 12 seconds of looking for you. Where like
right.
yeah these and of course it's hardware limitations, but man those soldiers in this thing are particularly dumb, and some of their like I don't know about you. The first time I went through, I was trying to be stealthy, and I just didn't really feel like I was, I don't know if the game's really equipped to be entirely stealthy. Like I really had a hard time kind of going through and not killing things. Um, this
A lot of
one,
it was knocking them out. You had to punch them out, and it really didn't uh, cause that much of an issue if you snuck up behind them, punched them out, ran by them, that kind of stuff. So
yeah, actually that was kind of what I did, and I think if I'm gathering correctly, I mean we'll get to that in or further down the road here, but I think punching them out counts as killing them. I think it's the same. This game's equivalent of just snapping their necks.
well,
Because
that was one thing I know that they took that out because of well, they get back up though. That's the thing. They'd
well, I think it's further down because I remember punching some of the ones in the beginning and they went down after like the three punches or whatever, and then about
yeah.
middle of the way through the game, like I would punch them and then they'd get knocked out, but then they get back up again. Oh God, I'm not gonna. Oh God, I can't believe I just did that. So,
Oh,
but anyway, they they get up and but as soon as you like punch them again, I think they drop dead that time. I don't know if there's some sort of like maybe concession as to like maybe the enemies are getting a little bit tougher as your arsenal gets improved, but it just seems like I was having a harder time like taking some of these guys out. Like these in the very beginning, it's kind of a one shot kill with your 5.7 or 5.7. Is that what? Yeah, the 5.7.
yeah, it's supposed to be a 5.57, but they must have shortened it. But
Yeah, it's weird. Anyway, and like and some of the enemies like in the actual fortress once you get in there will take two shots with that thing. So I think there's some sort of concession to like them being stronger inside.
I remember the dogs taking more shots for some reason. Well, I guess it's because they're tougher, but
I was gonna say the dogs are kind of a pain in the ass to kill because they move very quickly and they'll just jump on top of you and maul your ass. And if you're not careful and you don't move away very quickly, you can find yourself getting overwhelmed by a bunch of dogs. Like I remember, like I mean, the dogs kind of took me out pretty quickly the first couple times I ran
yeah.
into them because I was trying to sneak past them and they just like, hey, there's that guy, and I was like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, and just basically based on the like the system I was using to play this thing on, the start and select button are in a kind of a weird position, so I kind of like I was going to try to switch over to a gun or something like that, and I'd ended up just crawling instead because start is the crawl button and select is basically what
Yeah.
drags up the pause menu, which lets you cycle through your inventory and use the codec. So one thing I did forget to mention too is right after this or in this area, I guess you're introduced to your support team. We mentioned Mei Ling and Campbell, but you're also introduced to McBride, who's CIA, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
Weasel,
then
who is a mercenary, apparently in the same ballpark of ability as Solid Snake is. Which I don't know if I would have went with the name Weasel, but I mean, I guess I don't know if you're really given a choice with these names. So Weasel, just
yeah.
yeah, and his portrait's a little weird. That is one thing I will I want to mention is the characters that were already kind of established in this series. Their portraits come across as pretty good, but the ones that this is their first appearance, like Weasel and McBride, and even Chris, who we're about to get introduced to, their portraits don't seem as good. They seem a little bit more like almost like wide-eyed anime kind of characters versus like Snake, Campbell, and Mei Ling.
Well, I think it's because well, they definitely look more like the guy's other style. So they kind of look. You can tell that he was aping the design, the designs of the characters from the existing game. But then, if you look at them, they're more along the lines of what you see in Boktai, and it's just kind of it's a very loose, kind of sketchy style. Yeah, talking over myself.
I'm not very good at describing art style, so I'm you gotta go gonna fill
Well,
the
I'm
gap
not
there
either.
for me.
Yeah, terrible. But
It's an interesting, I guess, like differentiating thing between the characters that are introduced in this game and then the characters that are just not holdovers, but they're brought over. I mean, I guess it's a total of 3 characters that really are, but yeah, you can definitely see the different character design, I guess, style for those 3 that are brought over. Mei Ling does have sort of like a little bit more of that soft feel to her that the other characters do, but I mean, I guess you can also just attribute to that she's supposed to be sort of cute. And of course, Snake, I think is. Yeah, I remember, and of course, Snake hits on her. I mean, that's just what Snake does. Yeah, I mean, if you're a female, Snake's interested in you. You're a female and you're breathing, Snake's interested in you for some ungodly reason. It's kind
I
of.
was going to say, considering it's 2 or 3 years before Metal Gear Solid, and she's younger, I guess it's possibly creepier. I don't know, but
she's in college. I mean, unless she's one of those savants or whatever that she's 16 years old at MIT or something like that. Then I think we're in the realm of creepy. But I think she's probably like 20 years old in this or something like that. So I would I would put this as not so creepy, just weird that like Snake just immediately like, hey, want to see my snake?
now she kind of looked like Chun-Li from Street Fighter Alpha. That's what I always thought.
You know what? Yeah, now that you mention that, it is kind of like what she does look like. That's a good reference there. Yeah, she's definitely got that look to her. So, all right, and so we're eventually introduced. Or you know what? We did kind of completely forget to mention that a Delta Squad force is sent here to basically get the guy who created Metal Gear extracted, and you get a message from Campbell that the entire squad was wiped out, except for one, and that is Chris Jenner. And I don't think you're immediately told that she's a female. So
right, course, it's CHRIS, not KRIS. So
yeah. So I mean, there's maybe some like little like subterfuge going on there that this might be, this might actually be a guy, and then you run into Chris, and it's like, Snake immediately pulls out his Snake again and like, hey, how you doing? Like he kind of berates her a little bit, and then and in the same breath like hits on her. It's just like, God, Snake, can you just cool it for 1 second? I mean, she had her entire squad wiped out, and you're sitting here trying to sleep with her. It's like, dude, just back off a little bit, will you? So, so Chris is the sole survivor of the Delta Squad thing. You meet up with her. Or you basically contact her over codec, and she tells you how to sneak into the base, and you can't go into the front door like you did or I guess in Metal Gear 2. Is that how you did it? You got in the front door?
Kind of had to go through these vents. Well, there was a couple of ways in, but it was more like in Metal Gear Solid. This is actually closer to Snake's Revenge, where except in this one you didn't have somebody get themselves kidnapped to get you through the door. Some guy just is dumb and he leaves the door open. So
Yeah, this you have to sneak in through the vents too. So
well, that was kind of cool because if you followed the guy, you got to the suppressor, you found that. So I thought that was kind of cool.
yeah,
But
nice little yeah. There's so many little touches in this game, and I mean we'll try to bring them up as they come along. But I mean I think we're gonna kind of tangentially go backwards a couple times and forwards, just talking about the little things that they throw into this game. So. And as we mentioned here, this game is divided up into stages effectively. I don't know about you, or how you did, but man, I got a terrible ranking on nearly all of them.
um, I got good on a couple of them, but yeah,
Aren't you
I
fancy?
messed up. Yeah, I killed. No, it was like I was kind of surprised, but I think it was based on just how many you killed and how oftentimes I kept getting discovered. I was terrible at that. I had a really hard time with the cameras, getting past those because I was trying to run under them like in Metal Gear Solid, but the problem is they could see you. You had to use the box. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to. Well, actually, I just stopped trying to run under them. But could you do press your back against the wall and sneak? I think you could.
No, I tried that. That didn't work, unfortunately. Yeah, it still would catch you. I was like, yeah, because I figured like, oh, I could go under it and it'll be fine. And I pressed myself up against the wall and started, doing the scoot. And yeah, it just went off. I was like, oh, okay, well, clearly that doesn't work. Great, swell. So the cameras were the bane of my existence in this game, especially like the gun turrets later on. Thankfully you don't run into them too often, and they always give you a way to kind of get around them if it's an area you're supposed to be in. Did you say you could plop yourself in a box and let it pass you?
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know why I didn't think of that. I just basically started using chaff grenades every time I run into an area where I couldn't see like an easy way around the cameras. I just throw a chaff grenade.
Yeah, most of the time, if once you got those, that was probably the better way to deal with it because it was just a lot faster. But the boxes, you could always do those. Use that to sneak past the cameras. But in the other games, it was easier in Metal Gear Solid and stuff to be able to just run past them like that. So, underneath them rather.
Yeah. All right. And so once you're infiltrated, there's actually like this is another like one of those little throwaway things. I think this is in the third stage. You're going through the sewers, and these two soldiers are like commenting on to each other that there's been a lot of heavy rains all of a sudden, and that there's going to be some flooding in the sewers that you're in. You go through this area, and this kind of horrifying sound effect of rushing water comes through. I mean, if you're playing with headphones and you have it up a little loud, like it might hurt your ears a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm just sensitive to those noises, but this like rushing water thing will come through and just wipe you away. So the key to getting through these sewers is you have to kind of go around the maze sections and then hang yourself onto a ladder and then move on. Which I thought was like a neat little effect, and it's something that they never do anything with after this stage. Actually, no, they do kind of bring it back up as far as like the flooding goes, but they like I said, this rushing water mechanic, they never bring that back, and it just I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's the portable nature of this game. They wanted to make a bunch of little things that would keep you interested and keep you going, especially since these episodes you can plow through them. And I mean, if you know what you're doing, you can probably get through most of these in like 10 minutes at most.
Yeah.
Me going through the first few times, I mean, there was a few of them I ended up getting lost a couple times, and probably took me like a half hour, 45 minutes to get through a couple of them. I think one of them I got really lost, and I spent like an hour doing it. So
I think the part with where you had to do the cardboard boxes, I had a hard time with that, with getting through the sorting.
Oh, did you?
That was.
Go ahead.
Oh no! I screwed that up a couple times, so it took longer than I figured on. But
I'll tell you the truth on that one. After screwing that up a few times, I got to walk through. I was like, I am not doing this.
The thing in the
really
sewer that made me think of. Do you ever watch It's Always Sunny?
No.
Okay, there's an episode where they're trying to get to this movie. It was this thing called Thunder Gun Express, and they were, everybody split up and they were trying to take a different way because there's just really bad traffic, and they're trying to get to the premiere of this movie. And two of the characters go through the sewers because this one guy's like, oh yeah, he's like, I always do this. It's super fast, and the problem is like waves of sewage would come through every once in a while, and he's like, this is why you take off your clothes and hold them over your head so they don't get wet. And then so I was thinking about that when I got to this, obviously. And it's funny because I remember this part, and when I saw that episode, I thought of this. So that was it was like a reversal. No, I thought that was a really cool little set piece. And they do have, one of the cool things is they do kind of have a gimmick, or there's something you have to use a tool to get around, or you have to do something to get around it. And I did kind of like that. Like later on, you have to use the IR goggles, the night vision goggles to see stuff, or the vapor, the what do you call it, cartomizer or whatever. I have to look and see. Do you know if they called the cigarette? Well, it's called a fogger because they wanted to get around the drug reference or whatever in the U.S. version and get a E rating. So they didn't call it a cigarette. You had this thing called a fogger. I'm just wondering if those were cigarettes in the Japanese version.
Yeah, because even in the European version, it's called a fogger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which I wonder if they just sort of use the same localization thing for it as
I guess so. Yeah.
As the American one. Yeah, because I thought it was weird too, and they even show like Snake smoking in the opening cutscene, but they don't actually show the cigarette. They just show like a little like cigarette smoke like trail going up. So I wonder if that was a way to get around it too. Like, hey, this could be anything, or it could be something steaming in the background. You don't know. This might not be a cigarette, even though it's pretty obvious implication that Snake's smoking. So,
well, there was that, and then they talked about whiskey in the beginning too. That was kind of interesting. That slipped through. So
yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this game that I cannot believe this game got an E. I mean, they talk about genocide. I mean, usual Metal Gear stuff, I guess, but it's just like they talk a lot about stuff. And I mean, one of the bosses. I mean, well, you know what? I'll talk about that when we get to him. But man, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in this game. So, so moving on from there, you go through. I think this was maybe like one of the areas like I think I had a problem with, where I think it was the tower. This is the fourth stage. I think I got lost a lot in this area.
I thought that was the third stage with where you're trying to meet Chris. That was tricky, going through all that. That was the third stage, right?
I think so. Yeah. And that's also another like thing that they brought the Game Boy Color thing, made use of the Game Boy Color thing. Chris will tell you she's to differentiate herself from the other characters because they can't really show you a wiggle walk like they had Meryl do in Metal Gear Solid. They basically have her doing, or she said she's going to wear a ponytail, and then Snake comments that that anyone, or a lot of these soldiers have ponytails, and so she's going to wear a red baseball cap too. So I thought that was kind of an interesting little touch there. So, she's red baseball cap, ponytail, and so you kind of have to watch for that. Like I wasn't really sure what I was looking for ponytail wise, and so the first person I saw with a red baseball cap, I was like, oh cool. I went up to him and just the alert went off and clubbed me in the head with the gun. I was like, well, clearly that's not Chris. Wonderful. So that did not go very well for me. The fourth stage, let me see. Yeah, you end up going through the tower area again, or a little bit more of the tower area, back down into the jungle, and this is where you fight the first boss, who is, oh god, what is his name?
Slasher Hawk.
Yeah, Slasher Hawk. It was, man, weird stereotype of Aboriginal people from Australia. So,
well, it was weird because he was basically a guy that was adopted by he was adopted by some Aborigine people, but then the remainder of their group shunned him, and he basically had to deal with racism all of his life, and that was kind of like, whoa, that was a little heavy. Because basically the Aborigines were racist against him, and then he had to leave. They kicked him out, and then everybody was like, "Well, you're an Aborigine, so they're racist to him." So it was like, okay, that was kind of weird. But then he decided to have a 5 foot long, and they say specifically it's a 5 foot long metal boomerang that can cut a calf in half.
Yeah, that was another. Yeah, like I said, this game should not have gotten an E. There's no getting around this. Just some of the stuff they put in text. It's like, okay, so we're dealing with racism, and then a guy with a gigantic boomerang who can cut a calf in half. I mean, yeah, it's just weird that they got that specific with it. It's like, okay, well, all right. I mean, I guess if you're looking for a gigantic land animal that seems realistic, that's something you could cut through in one fell swoop. I guess a cow is a good way to go, but I don't know. It just, yeah, just this oddly specific thing. I mean, it could have said like cut a person in half, maybe, but yeah. And of course, that doesn't really actually work because you can take a few hits from the boomerang just fine. So, because video games. So, this fight's not too difficult. I'm trying to remember. Like, I think I just used grenades. I mean, the grenade, like so much so that the chaff grenades were the superstar of Metal Gear Solid. I think the just regular grenades are the superstar of this game.
Yeah, you ended up using it for. It was kind of weird because some of the later bosses you would have used the Stinger missiles, but for whatever reason they didn't go with that. So you just, it's kind of interesting that they did what they did. But I mean, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't make sense, and we'll talk about that a little later with one of the bosses. It's like, yeah, I don't think that would happen. So,
yeah, there's a lot of odd concessions here, but I mean. I guess considering the hardware that this is on, I think they did the best they could with the bosses, and they're not up to par for most Metal Gear bosses, but they're still pretty good boss fights. So, and also like having the boomerang fly around, you lobbing grenades, and then in the like second half of the fight, like he starts throwing his hawk. Or not throwing his hawk, but sending his hawk after you too. There's a lot going on in the on screen, and there's really no flicker, no slowdown. It's a pretty impressive little thing for the Game Boy. I mean, if you remember like playing Super Mario Land, like you get like two non-Goombas or whatever they are, the Goombas or whatever on there, and you'd start getting slowdown or whatever. I mean, God forbid he threw like the little marble or whatever is in there too, and it just comes to a complete crawl. The fact that they managed to do this with basically the same hardware was pretty impressive, and like I said, keep it from slowing down. So that is something I guess on pretty much all fronts with Metal Gear games. Like they're almost always like technical masterpieces. So. After this boss fight, this goes into we mentioned the racism thing. This is in his death, his death speech. He tells you about his history and everything, and it's like I didn't really ask, but I guess we're gonna get told it anyway. Okay. Snake seems a very good. Seems yeah. Maybe he should consider once he retires for good from being a soldier, he should be like a therapist or something or a counselor. Like he's a very good listener. So. Unless you're female, then he's trying to sleep with you. So maybe I don't know. It's kind of weird. Snake's a weird guy when you really get down to it. Like he's this like amazing killer and super soldier and sneaking expert. He's also a good listener, but then he just wants to shove his snake in anything that has a receptacle. It seems like sometimes. So. And this comes.
You got to deal with that stress somehow. So
that's true. Yeah, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. I completely understand that. So, and this moves us on to stage 5, which is my least favorite stage, is the barracks, and this is the conveyor belt stage.
Yeah.
Wow, boy. If this game had a point where I think I may have thrown in the towel, this may have been it, just because of how frustrating this area can be. Thankfully, there is some. I'm going to call him Demigod. Of a person putting the map and all of the little color things you need to do on on the internet, and boy, let me tell you, that was a huge help. It shows you like which direction the conveyor belts go, which I guess I'm not really explaining this very well, but you have to get into a box, and the box doesn't really work as well, I think, in this game. Like, I don't know about you, I was having a hard time using the box for anything outside of this conveyor belt thing. Like, it seemed like the soldiers always knew I was in the box. I don't know if there's some sort of
Well,
thing.
the box, the soldiers in the box never really worked past the original game. I felt, I don't know. This though, it's useful for getting past the cameras, I guess, but it's kind of hard to. I had a hard time just switching on and off, getting to it. I guess it was just easier to use the chaff grenades.
Yeah. This is another instance of like this game, and I don't know if we really talked about the character sprite work, but man, the sprite work in this game, considering what they had to deal with, I mean, I like the fact that Snake actually has a or can move diagonal in this game is pretty impressive by itself, and just has unique sprites for that. It even has his headband kind of waving when he's on the side or going diagonal. I think one of my favorites in this is just the box, the way it moves ever so slightly off the ground. Give you that implication of the feet, being out there while Snake's like walking. Like you don't actually get to see the feet; it just the box just gets a shadow and moves up a little bit. But it's a nice little nod to Snake running around in a box and how ridiculous that must look. So it's like you said, we've got the super soldier running around with covering his body up with a box with his feet just kind of sticking out as he's running by. I mean, it's got to be quite the sight, and I think this game does a nice little nod to just how ridiculous this whole segment is. So.
Well, they have multicolored cardboard boxes too, so that's
so
thing.
you have to get into the box to get onto the conveyor belt, and then there's these stations that it will decide which direction you go on based on what color box you're in. Initially, you only get the yellow box, and then as you're going through these conveyor belt sections, it will drop you off in certain areas, and you can get different colored boxes. Ultimately, you get red, blue, and yellow boxes, and you have to use these sort of to chain together like what direction you want to go in. So you have to go into the menu, switch out what box you want to get into. It's honestly, like I said, if I was playing this without a guide or any sort of walkthrough, I mean, this may have had me throw in the towel. I mean, I just found it completely frustrating. I don't know. I don't know. I always have had a hard time putting like maps together in my head of certain areas, and this was one of those things like I just could not remember. And after going back to the same area a couple times or just going to dead ends, like I just kind of threw the guide up and I was like, all right, I'm just going to use this as a walkthrough. The hell with this area. I want out of this area before I get completely turned off from this game.
Yeah. But once you get past that, let's see. Trying to think, what part was that? Did we get to Jimmy yet?
I was actually just gonna get there. Getting out of these boxes, this box area will lead you to Jimmy, who is the creator of Metal Gear. Who, man, oh man, I don't like Jimmy. I gotta say, I do not like Jimmy.
Oh, he's a little shit. I mean,
yeah.
It's kind of funny because Otacon's a dork, but he's also kind of likable, and you feel bad for him despite
Yeah.
he obviously invests a lot of emotion on women that he probably shouldn't be. But Jimmy's just kind of a little prick, and he's just not. I don't know. I guess that was kind of the point. He's kind of disposable, but I'm kind of wondering why they even really bothered. I guess it was just because they had to have something where you rescue the person that created Metal Gear.
Yeah,
so
the plot reasons basically. I think it's the only reason he exists is just to be an information giver of how to stop Metal Gear. Like, I mean, they literally could have just had it a file, I suppose. So
it was kind of interesting because he's like a little fat kid, and it's kind of weird, but he's just such a prick to Snake, and it's just like, okay,
yeah, and
he doesn't really get better.
no, he's kind of a shithead. One of the few notes I took of this game is like he looks like his sprite work. He just looks like a fat guy wearing a bowling shirt. Like that's just what he reminds me of. It's just that stereotypical like fat dude wearing a bowling shirt going to his bowling league on a Saturday night.
He kind of looks like I forget who he looks like, but he looks like anyway, whatever. But you kind of after that, I think the chapter ended after that, right?
Yeah, and that's when you move on to where the power gets cut off, and you have to go get the power turned back on. And this is where you need to. I think this is where you get the night vision goggles, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right. And then you had to use you could use the thermal goggles too, but there was, that was kind of interesting because, well, later on that kind of has some, there's a little bit of a difference, like when you get to the boss, but
Yeah, and one thing I think we did forget to mention is the way you get Jimmy is, you come to the front of his holding cell that he's in, and he'll tell you that they've recently been putting walls up in this area, so they should be pretty fresh and weak. So you go get some C4, you blow the wall, and I didn't find this myself, but I was reading that you can actually blow up the wrong wall, and Jimmy will like just make fun of you for blowing up the wrong wall, basically. Like, hey, what the hell are you doing? It's just like, oh man. So it's like, I'm trying to save you. I blew up the wrong wall. My bad. I'll go blow up a different wall. But rather than, hey, no big deal, it's like, hey, what the hell are you doing? You're dumbass. Ugh, yeah, it's kind of frustrating. So, like I said, there's really nothing redeeming about this little petulant shit. I mean, we'll get to what happens to him later, but yeah, I'm kind of glad to see him be written out of this game, we'll say, when it happens. So, and from there, you're going around in the dark. Then you go back to the area with the lasers. I mean, now, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, the power gets cut out, and because Metal Gear shoots its first missile, which.
Yeah, the railgun. Yeah,
Yeah. I thought this game was like already over. Like, I hadn't looked up how long this game was, and I was like, man, did I plow through this game a lot faster than you're supposed to? Because Metal Gear just shot off a nuclear missile, and you're like, oh, well, fuck. This isn't going to turn out so well. And then thankfully, and you end up finding out it goes out in the middle of like the desert or something like that, and just is a dud. It's a fake nuclear missile, just to kind of show off, like, haha, hey, we can shoot these, just so you know. So let's reconsider giving in to my demands here, So yeah, so the power goes out. You kind of go back through the conveyor belt stage, but now you just have to. You can get onto the conveyor belts and walk on them. You just have to crawl through the little things, which this section's. It's not so great. It's not so bad either, but it's not so. There's really nothing to it. I mean, it's kind of a simple area. So, and then you go through the barracks again, which, man, I don't know. I mean, this. There's a lot of weird areas in this game here, but this leads you to. Am I remembering it? Yeah, this is the Pyro Bison fight.
No, it was what's his name? Marionette Owl first.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. Oh, okay. So this is the weirdest boss fight I think I've ever dealt with in a Metal Gear game, and not in terms of like how you actually approach him, but just character wise, he is seriously jacked up. I mean, one, I thought it was a female for a little bit, and then said he a few times. I'm like, oh, okay, so that is a dude. He's basically got these two puppets that he controls, and he fights in the darkness a lot. So this is where the night vision goggles or the thermal goggles will come in handy. But he does make mention of your figure and how nice your femurs are. So he clearly is making these puppets that he's controlling out of people parts. It's really
yes, that
horrific.
Was kind of messed up. Yeah. And apparently, you can find out he's a serial killer, and he was a we'll find out a little more about that. But the other thing is the two puppets. It was Koharu, and I forget the other name. I looked this up because I remember kind of wondering about that. Like, was that supposed to be something? And apparently, those are the names of the two women in this one play, and it was called The Love Suicides at Amijima. And it was originally a bunraku, or puppet theater play.
Okay.
So, and back in, basically that's one of those where, I don't know if you've seen Thunderbolt Fantasy or something along those lines, where you had a large puppet like that, and the puppeteer would actually be behind the puppet operating it and kind of moving it around, and you could see the puppeteer. But that was one of the things that they did in that. But anyway, that was kind of a reference to the fact that he's got these two dolls, basically, that... Except these ones are made of dead people apparently.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So this fight, he turns out the light, and you basically need to use your thermal goggles or your night vision goggles. Using the thermal goggles might be an easier way of going about it, in a sense. if you can keep track of which one he is, this kind of brings up a little bit of the weakness of using, I guess, the hardware of the Game Boy, where switching between the items isn't nearly as brisk as it is in the PlayStation, where you just tap the L1 and you just scroll real
Right.
quick. This does get a little tedious, kind of going back and forth with this, but I did enjoy this boss fight. I thought it was a pretty clever implementation of what they had to deal with. If you like, basically they kind of go in a triangle and they sort of rotate around as to which one is which. And if you shoot the marionettes, they'll just attack you. But if you shoot the or why am I blanking on his name again? Or Marionette Owl.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's two birds in this one. I think it's a weird one now that I think about it. But anyway, um, if you shoot Marionette Owl, it does the damage. Then that's kind of how you get through it. So it's sometimes best just to switch between the thermal goggles and the night vision goggles, because I think once you hit him with the night vision goggles on, he throws a flashbang, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, he'll throw a flashbang, and if you don't switch him off fast enough, it'll blind you.
Yeah, so I think that's where using the thermal goggles might be the better option, because I don't think it blinds you if you're using the thermals. So
Right, yeah. So, but then when you have the night vision, you can see who it is. It's kind of like you have to switch between the two, kind of juggle.
yeah,
So,
yeah, I would figure out who is who in that one, and then just switch over to the thermals, and then just like as they rotate, I just keep track of who is who. Basically,
right.
it was a pretty easy fight for the most part, but I enjoyed just like the mechanic of it. I just wish like, and again, this is not not Konami's fault for this one. This is just the Game Boy's limitations, but I do wish it was just an easier way to cycle through. But then it may have made the boss fight maybe a little too brisk, I suppose. So,
Right.
but anyway, yeah. So after you get done beating him, he kind of confesses to you once again because he's dying, and why wouldn't he be? Just yeah, weird thing that everyone seems to need to tell Snake their life story, but he talks about finding his friend like blown into pieces, and then just that's how he becomes like fascinated with them and everything, and just yeah, it's really weird. And, one thing we didn't mention is, of course, you have your support team that you can use for codec. Campbell's kind of useless. A Weasel is the most useful one. He'll give you information, and then basically, eventually, will just tell you the trick on how to defeat the boss if you're looking for the trick. McBride is kind of an asshole, and will just tell you like, "Hey, you're the legend. Figure it out yourself. Doesn't matter who you're fighting." It's like,
Yeah.
thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. And he's the one who adds the geopolitical information to the game. Other than that, he's kind of, I don't know. I found myself rarely ever contacting him. I would contact him during the bosses just to hear his kind of like jackass comment to me about being the legend. Figure it out yourself, buddy. But other than that, I didn't find myself calling Kodak pretty much throughout this game. So. Okay, so from here you end up heading up. Yeah, you basically are. Is this where you climb up the mountain? No, this is like jungle area, and you get the mine detector here, and you're going through an area where basically the whole purpose of this area is just crawl through it. Because yeah, there's mines everywhere, and there's like literally like no path you can take without running into a mine. So, and of course, picking up the mines makes it a little bit easier too, because you can collect mines. I didn't really find these useful until the very end of the game. I mean, we'll get to that, but yeah, the mines didn't really feel like they were that great of a weapon to use in this one. So,
Right.
especially since you kind of just go and take a couple shots at the enemies, and they kind of drop like a fly there. I mean, there's really not much to this level either, unfortunately. I think this one was kind of more gimmicky as far as just using the mine detector. So, you get up, and I think this is where you're contacted, and you find out there might be a traitor in your midst. I think Weasel the one that mentions. Oh no, man, who was it? Pyro that mentions a traitor?
I thought it was Viper. No. I think it might have been Pyro. I'm trying to think.
Because like this is where you run
Anyway,
into the helicopter, right?
right. That's where Viper appears in the helicopter, and
And
you had to.
doesn't they or don't they pick up somebody in the helicopter?
I can't remember, but later on you fight. What was it? See, for some reason I'm not remembering this part. So
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know if it's maybe just because like this isn't as, I suppose, iconic as Metal Gear Solid. Like a lot of these things kind of blend together, and especially like it's weird because they're segmented into stages so easily. I, as good of a game as I feel this is, it's not really as memorable as Metal Gear Solid is. So
well, part of the problem is they kind of it bleeds together a little bit whenever they get to, it's like, well, we're going to mention this department like the DFLMNOP or the Gindra Liberation Front, like it kind of bleeds together a little bit. So you just got to know that it's like, okay, well, these are, yeah, basically it's kind of an excuse for a game. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's for the most part all video game plots. I mean, although Kojima seems to have a nice little stance on some of his things that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, but anyway, yeah. So you kind of confronted by Viper in a helicopter. And then all of a sudden, artillery starts raining down on you, and you have to run backwards. Mei Ling calls you to let you know she's going to update your codec or your Soliton radar so you can see where the artillery shells are going to hit. Unfortunately, I kind of kept getting hit by the artillery shells. Man, I can't say that word. By the shells. We'll just go with that. And just yeah, I didn't find the radar upgrade very useful. I just kind of like ran basically. I almost found it more noise than anything running back through the minefield. Like
yeah,
yeah, it wasn't. I don't think the
well,
radar upgrade would have been was very helpful. I think maybe just like giving you some sort of like shadow on the ground would have been more helpful.
yeah,
It's a weird little design choice, but it's nothing too terrible. So, and this is where you jump back into the power plant. You're supposed to go to the power plant to basically shut it off, so Metal Gear can't shoot its railgun because it uses a lot of power. I mean, yeah, who would have thought? But I mean, that's another like weakness of Metal Gears in general. When you think about them, is it just seems like sort of ridiculous that this gigantic like mobile tank needs to be hooked up to power to be able to shoot its railgun, sort of defeating the purpose of having a walking battle tank, I suppose. So I don't know what
yeah,
the issue is with this one, but yeah, this is where it makes a nice little callback to the flooding because you come across two more soldiers who say, "Hey, there's been or all this flooding is kind of leaked into the power plant, and just be careful of the water because some of it's got electricity going through it, and you can't really tell which is which." So yeah, this is this is a weird little area. There are some water. There is some water you can walk through, but there's really no indication as to like what water you can and cannot walk through. So,
yeah.
and this also is kind of like one of those areas that I'm not. There's a puzzle towards the end of this one where you kind of have to like shuffle through the crates, basically like press your back up against it, like you would be in if you're thinking like Metal Gear Solid, where you press your back up against the wall and then shuffle through these crates. It's kind of a maze sort of thing, and I wasn't particularly fond of this area too. Like I would get so far into a certain point, be like, oh okay, dead end, cool, and have to backtrack. It wasn't as frustrating as the conveyor belt thing, but it's just I wasn't too keen on this area. So
Yeah, that was kind of funny though. Like I don't know, that felt really weird though, like how narrow those like the little areas were. But yeah, no. Um I don't know. I had a hard time doing the wall crawl compared to some other things. It just seemed it was a little stiffer, I guess, and other things, but might have just been me. I don't know.
no, I agree. Like I don't think the wall crawl was something that was implemented very well in this one. So rarely used it. I mean, really, the only time I ever used it was in these instances where you sort of had to use it or you were forced to use it. There is a neat little thing that I didn't discover until I think maybe like the 10th stage of the game. But if you press your back up against the wall and then press I think the B button, the direction that your back is to, it will pan the camera up or that direction.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what made me accidentally press the B button, and I was like, wait, what just happened? And so yeah, if you press your back up against the wall and do that, it'll kind of like it's sort of the concession of that it can't actually do a 3D camera and show you like around the corner or whatever, but this is a way of kind of seeing what's a little bit further ahead if you can. So, but it's only the direction that
Oh,
your back
okay.
is, so it's sort of limited in its use. There's not really a lot of areas you can go back to. Like I said, I played this through a second time, I just finished it up yesterday, and yeah, it didn't come in handy as much as I thought it was going to. So like I was like, oh good, now that I have this knowledge, I can use it. And then I started using it. I'm like, oh, there's not really too many places you can use this. So, and once you reach the end of this area, this yeah, like I said, I'd say the second weakest area of the game as far as just that stupid shuffle puzzle, I guess you can call it if you want to, the snake shuffle puzzle, or maze. You come into might be the most interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. All these Black Chamber guys are interesting, but this is where you're introduced to Pyro Bison, who he seems to get a little too into burning shit. I mean, I understand that all these people get a little too into their shit, but man, it's a pretty cool boss fight. But again, this is just like lob grenades at him, and it's pretty much he's a done deal. I mean, he's not really that much of a threat ever, unfortunately. But I didn't have much of a problem with him. But when he dies, he decides to, again, he confesses everything to you or whatever, and once again tells you his sob story, and then decides to light himself on fire to kill himself because flames are the great equalizer, and let me tell you, I wasn't really sure if he was committing suicide or coming because he's burning himself.
Yeah, that
like,
was a little weird.
Yes,
yeah.
it's like woo, okay.
Well, he was talking about the type of fuel he mixes. I mean, he was supposed to be like a nutcase basically, but
yeah, all these Black Chamber people seem to be nut jobs. So yeah, I mean, he's talking about how every body burns differently, and he wants to know like how your body's gonna burn or whatever. He said, soon enough I'll find out, and even which kind of is dumb. Like he brings up how many people you've killed up to this point, and I mean after that point, I think let me see, I was at 57, so. I was, like I said, after a certain point, I gave up sneaking and just was like, every person I came across, it's like, yep, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. And especially those areas where, I got found out, I would just go and shoot people. So, let's see. But yeah, like I said, this boss fight's a little weird. And, well, not the boss fight, the boss is a little weird. Pyro Bison's just an oddity. Like I said, he really seemed to enjoy burning himself. So, maybe a little too much. So. Now this is where you go back through the power plant. You have to, let's see. Yeah, this is an area where you get told that you have 30 minutes before Metal Gear is going to launch again. So the best thing to do is just to bring down the entirety of the power plant because the floor around the generator is now electrified, so you can't get to it, even though, Sneak could probably just jump over the thing. But yeah, video game logic, you can't think too hard on it. So apparently these pillars are randomly generated. I had no idea. The walkthrough I was using didn't seem accurate with that. And then the second time through, these pillars were somewhere else. I was like, oh, okay. Well, this is a pain in the ass. So that's frustrating. So yeah, once you place the C4, you have 5 minutes to get out of here, which isn't that bad, but if you're in a spot where it's pretty far away, kind of becomes a little bit of a pain in the ass to run through. I thankfully kind of got through an area, or put my last C4 in an area where I had plenty of time to get through, so it wasn't really that big of an issue for me. So.
Okay.
Did you have much of a problem with that?
I don't know. Not compared to. I still think the place that I had the worst part was the sorting facility. So.
Yeah, that was an area where, like I said, for me, like I said, that was the low point of the game, honestly. So. This wasn't too bad. It was just the randomization of it made it really weird, especially.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know, like, after you place the C4, you're gonna have this 5 minute thing. So it's like if I had known that I was gonna have to like run out the door in 5 minutes, I would have like thought about the placement, and I did that on my second playthrough. Like I went and found all the areas and then placed them as as the most efficient way possible to get out of there. So the place closest to the exit was where the last one ended up going. So this is where you go to the jungle, or back outside to the jungle area, because you brought down the house basically. And this is where we've brought up that somebody mentioned that there's a traitor in your midst, and some of these I don't know if they've brought it up yet, but the guy Anonymous that they keep like hinting to, I think comes up here again. There's a fifth member of Black Chamber, and all indications seem to be that it's Kris Jenner, your love interest, because she's female and near you, so of course Snake's in love with her, and and she just seems to conveniently kind of pop in and out. They mentioned that she wasn't actually with Delta Squad when Delta Squad got wiped out. As you're coming out here, you run into Jimmy again, which, thank God this is the last we'll see Jimmy. But he was defended by one of the other last, I guess, member of Delta Squad that survived. He got killed here, defending Jimmy, and he tells Jimmy before he dies that Kris wasn't with them when they basically got attacked and wiped out, giving you some kind of like hint that Kris isn't quite what she seems. So there's every indication that Kris is the traitor in your midst, but Snake believes her and has faith in her, because why wouldn't he? I suppose, I don't know. Snake's an oddly trusting guy. So, and then Jimmy thankfully starts telling you about Metal Gear and how else to take it out and like how it operates. And apparently I didn't really catch it in the cutscene, but he's wearing handcuffs, and then apparently there's a microphone built to the handcuffs, and whoever this Anonymous guy is or whatever, or no, I think this is Viper that blows him up, but blows up the handcuffs.
Yeah, it was Viper.
Yeah, okay, and blows Jimmy to smithereens. So nice way to him go out. And of course, Jimmy, just before he dies, or before he realizes he's going to die, he has this thing of he wants to do better and wants to change and wants to create something to make things better rather than just make something cool, even though it kills people. I don't really care how it gets used, and then his moment of reckoning comes, and he's like, but I thought you said I had time to make things better. It's like, well, I guess Snake lied to you, buddy, or just didn't realize you were attached to a bomb. So goodbye, Jimmy. No 21 gun salute for you, Jimmy. You will not be missed. So. And then this is an area where you go up through this is where you go through another minefield. And as you're going up to this boss fight, there's the artillery guns that got taken out, which kind of look like cool little, well, not effect, but nice little like sprite work there, where the guns are just kind of in shambles. I thought was a nice little like one-off thing that you don't see again here. And of course, because this is a Metal Gear game, you have to fight a helicopter. So, which I didn't have too much of a problem with. I thought you were going to have to use the Nikita missiles only on this, but you could throw hand grenades at the helicopter, which I don't know. Again, like I said, the hand grenades seem to be the superstar of this game again. So you blow up the helicopter, and you're treated to the general, who's the leader of the GLF's second hand, telling you, like she's sort of in love with the general, fell in love with his ideals and everything, and she kind of gives Snake the choice of killing her or not killing her, and Snake says, "Oh, I'm out of ammo." So, and she's like, "No, you're not." And
she's like, "You're lying." And he's like, "No, oh well."
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm just being a nice guy. It's like, I'm sparing your life. Why are you arguing with me? Okay, so. Oh yeah, because this is the area. Oh yeah, getting back into the helicopter thing. This is where you see somebody get into the helicopter after there's the suspicion of it being Kris, and you see somebody get in the helicopter, and it looks like her sprite kind of, because it's got lighter colored hair. So
I thought it was Kris, and then she's got like the blonde hair ponytail, so she doesn't really look anything like the character. So it's real weird. And then she pops up again later, and it's the same sprite. So I guess they just ran out of sprites to use, I guess. Yeah. Or they didn't want to give her a different one.
Yeah. I think what they did was try to convey that Snake was a good ways off and couldn't really tell the difference from that distance. And I think
I could see that.
I think that's as close to an answer as I could possibly give that, maybe. So.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you literally were like maybe, I don't know, an inch down from her when you see her get onto the helicopter. Like, you're not very far off, but I think the way it conveyed it was like, oh, Snake's pretty far off and can't really tell if it was Chris or not. It just seems to be the same color hair, and it's a female, so clearly it has to be Chris betraying you. So this is where you end up going to the Metal Gear headquarters, and I think this is where Chris calls you and gets very remorse about, she feels like she can't do anything right. I think this is where she tells you what she was actually doing was here basically to wipe out any indication or proof that the United States was involved in this whatsoever. Like, the United States was trying to kind of disrupt things by getting the Metal Gear back up and running, and all this, like I said, this kind of gets into colonialism and stuff, and it's a really weird plot point. I don't know. There's a lot of heavy-handedness going on for a Game Boy game, so I don't know about you. This is probably my favorite area in this game. I felt like they did it really well as far as like using everything you learned up to this point in as far as sneaking and your tools, and the areas weren't very confusing. This is, I think, 3 levels, if I'm remembering right. Like 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think it's like 3 or 4 floors you have to get through.
Yeah.
And I think they did a pretty good job of, they're not really connected to each other. So it's not where it's like, okay, I have to think like spatially, like, okay, I'm on this area and this drops down to this area. It just sort of like, in a way, like 3 stages or 4 stages you have to get through. And I think they did a pretty good job of doing that. One thing I didn't mention before is I really like the elevator sprite or like, animation in this game. I don't know why. I think it's kind of just a cool little like movement thing.
It looked like 3D. It was a really good animation, I thought.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised, like, just like how kind of cool it looked. This is sort of where the area that I was a little like, I got a little tired of seeing it, just because you would, I think you went from like the first basement
switch,
to the 50th basement, and then from there it was like the 98th or 99th basement. And then when you're in the 98th basement, I mean, God, you got to think like how deep this thing goes. 100 stories deep. It's underground. I mean, it's got to.
Well, that's how it was in the original too. So I believe.
Okay. And then when you get to the 98th, you see Metal Gear. I forget the actual name of this Metal Gear, but I don't think it really matters. But yeah, you see this Metal Gear up on the 98th and 99th floor, and then as you're going to, I guess, the Metal Gear hangar, I think this is the area where you find like the shambles, the wreckage of the of Metal Gear from Metal Gear 1, if I'm remembering right. Or is this Metal Gear 2? Yeah, like you see the wreckage of it. It's a pretty cool little sprite, and just like, oh, well, that's neat that they did that. So. Oh yeah, and then this is where you fight the head of Black Chamber. Is it Black Viper?
Yes.
Black Viper. Yeah.
Wait, Black Arts Viper.
Or Black Arts Viper. Yeah. And that's because he's into magic, I guess, or it seems like he's into magic. This boss fight was kind of cool, but was kind of slow too, just because of the way it was paced. Basically, he sets up tripwires on these pillars that are throughout the area, and you have to kind of maneuver through them. You get a quick flash of where the tripwires are, and you have to remember where they are, and then he'll move to a different area, or he'll flash them again and move them, I guess. I don't know what exactly the concession is on that, but he moves them around, so... and basically you sort of have to like maze your way through, or you can just trip the wires and just take the hit and go for them. But you're going through a lot of rations that way. Yeah, Black Arts Viper like gives you the whole thing of like, the whole reason he's doing this is because this is where he tells you,
because basically he goes on his life story about how everybody was killed. So it's kind of actually, it sounds a lot like the story of what happened to Dead Cell too in Metal Gear Solid 2. But they had to do a mission, and then they got, turned on and, wiped out. So they want to get revenge against the U.S. government. So
yeah, because if I'm remembering right, he's talking about the events of Metal Gear 2, where Foxhound becomes like the celebrated unit, and Snake becomes, the legend or whatever. And then because they're so up in the, I guess, as much as a military unit becomes in the public eye, but they become in the public eye as much as they do. So Black Chamber sort of becomes the black ops people who do the stuff that Foxhound used to do. And they did,
and then
they did a mission where they needed to be basically wiped off the face of the earth, and they sent Foxhound to do that, if I'm remembering right.
Yes, yeah. And it was Campbell that ordered it, and you find that out, so it was kind of like, okay, well,
yeah. There's, like I said, there's a lot to this thing that you wouldn't really think. So yeah, this isn't the last we'll see of him. He kind of gets out of this one. So
yeah, it was after that you let's see, yeah, you finally meet was that the
general, right?
Yes, that was where you met the general. You had to. That was actually a pretty cool fight, like in showing the scale of the Metal Gear compared to, because you only have so much of a screen. You can't show the whole thing, so you're basically only seeing its legs coming down on you, and you had to get it to step on weapons. You could use, I used the C4, but you could use the mines too, couldn't you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I was using the mines originally, and I was having a harder time with the mines. So after I died the first time trying to do this, I went to the C4 and found the C4 a lot more useful.
Okay, cool.
And then after that, this is the part where, like, I don't know about you, like, I tried to get through this Metal Gear, or the Metal Gear fight. Like, after you blow up its legs, you basically are fighting this crippled Metal Gear now. But I had a hard time, like, trying to figure out exactly what I was supposed to be doing, and I ended up dying a couple times before I got what you're supposed to do. So it shows, like, 3 areas that Metal Gear is kind of weak to, or three things you have to attack, basically. There's the gun turret that's up front, and then when you attack those, as a countermeasure, it will do like another gun turret that pops up out of the middle of its fuselage.
Yeah, they had a flamethrower like in the mouth area, kind of, and then there are also these little drones that pop out and attack you too. So
this thing was a damage sponge. I mean, Jesus Christ, this fight drug on quite a bit. I mean, thankfully, like, if you run out of Nikita missiles or grenades, it'll give you more grenades. So because once I got to the second part of this, because, like, basically the first part of this fight, you're supposed to throw a grenade at the front gun turret. It will pop up the secondary gun turret, and you're supposed to throw grenades at that and blow it up, basically, and then switch sides and do it on the other side. And then once you get or blow up those two, it'll start shooting missiles at you. Or once you blow up the first one, it starts shooting missiles at you while you're doing this. I actually kind of threw a grenade at parts that you weren't really supposed to a few times, and just ended up hitting myself with them. I don't know if you had any issues with that.
No, I was okay, but I mean, I did run out of grenades though, so
yeah. And then
it respawns, but
yeah, it's a little tricky to run and go get them when you got the missiles like flying all over the place too. So, and then the second part of this fight, basically, like, it turns into like the sort of second half of the Metal Gear Rex boss fight, where it opens its mouth, starts shooting a flame at you, and you're supposed to, like, throw grenades into its face, basically, or into its mouth, and kill it that way. So,
yeah.
And this is where I started running out of grenades, and I think twice I ran out of grenades, and I had to go and run to the side and go get more grenades, because, yeah, and like I said, this thing's a damage sponge. I think they could have maybe done with having this thing take a quarter less damage, and I think it would have felt a little bit better, but all in all, it was a pretty good boss fight, and like you said, they did a really good job of conveying the scale of Metal Gear with the limited resources they had to work with. So, once you blow up Metal Gear, the general tells you everything that's been going on. I'm not going to go ahead and... I don't think we really need to get into this part because, well, 1, we're a little pressed for time, and 2, there is a lot of plot dump going on in this section, so...
But then, yeah, basically the long story short is something happened. I actually, to be honest with you, I kind of got bored and I skipped through it because it was just, the story, it's like we were saying, the story was kind of, and that's one of the things, like, I kind of jumped through some of it. Like, I thought the little text dumps from the bosses were all right. I didn't really care what the general had to say because the overall story, it's like, the only things that I really took from it is Snake came in, there was some plot from government officials, and there was they were trying to use Snake to get things, and then they were going to double cross him and everybody else and kill them, and some other shit happened, and the end.
Yeah, yeah. I'll kind of run down this real quick because I think what happens first is it ends up being the final chapter basically, but you fight Blackheart's Viper again while Metal Gear is going up in an elevator. The elevator, or once like Metal Gear gets to the top of the elevator, it'll activate a satellite system which will throw, or not throw, launch nuclear missiles down. Which again, if you've got satellites with nuclear missiles, what the hell's the point of Metal Gear? Kind of, I don't know, just.
Yeah,
It's weird. You've got this gigantic walking battle tank, and that's what activates the satellites that have nuclear missiles. It's like, what? Why? What is the point of that? But anyway, so you have like 90 seconds to beat him. I was having a hard time the first like maybe 30 seconds, and then once I figured it out, like I beat him with like maybe 15, 20 seconds to spare. Basically, you attack him, and then whatever side of the screen is on, he'll flash and then go to the opposite side of that screen. So you basically just have to kind of keep that in mind, and then it's basically just shoot him because he doesn't really do much damage to you at this point. So once you do that, so I'll give a quick rundown of what I'm remembering from this thing. Yeah, because like you, I kind of got bored with the story here. Basically, Weasel messages you, lets you know that he found the traitor in your midst. It wasn't Chris. It turns out to be McBride. The whole time he was the fifth. No, he's not. Or I forget what the hell. But basically,
yeah.
like he disfigured himself and got plastic surgery to change his appearance, and is a double agent. I think, if I'm remembering, like he's the fifth member of Black Cell, and that's how everything was going on, and that's why he like berates you a little bit when you call and ask him for advice during a boss fight, because it's like, oh well, you're the legend, you should know. So he's kind of not showing his hand a little bit, but showing his hand a little bit. Weasel ends up killing him. You find out this big old conspiracy, and it turns out Weasel was brought on to this to basically kill everyone involved once it's all over with. But he has a change of heart because he thinks you're all a bunch of softies and he likes you. So I don't know what the hell happened there. So he's like, oh, he's like, I'll probably just get half my pay for letting you guys get away, but whatever, I'll take it. And, Campbell says like, oh, thanks, I'll repay you somehow. And then Weasel's like, I doubt it, but thanks anyway. So, so basically that's, yeah. And then of course, Chris and Snake reunite, and they're in love with each other, and they ride off into the sunset in a Jeep. And yeah, I get that's Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel.
Pretty much. No, I think it is one of those things where I don't know, you kind of play it for the game itself rather than
the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Joe. This is sort of one of those things where like I found the game fun, and I actually kind of do want to go back to these like special missions that it unlocks once you beat the game. It unlocks like 300 extra missions you can do, and if you beat all of them, it's sort of alluded that you've been playing as Raiden during these VR missions or these special missions. This is like the super soldier training that Raiden went through. So yeah, like I said, it's kind of a cool little game. And like I said, gameplay's a little bit stronger than the story, but I mean, like I said, you kind of got to look at it as this is Metal Gear Solid on a Game Boy Color. The fact that this thing works as well as it does is astounding, and the fact that it's still, I wouldn't say pretty, it's very playable today, even with today's standards. And I'd have a hard time not recommending this game. This is definitely one of my favorite Game Boy era games now. So.
Well, to my knowledge, they'd ever put this on the Virtual Console, did they?
No. This is another one of those things that it's really sad that it's just sort of lost to history unless you want to pay a lot of money for the cart or just, you want to emulate it. So, and that's the way we both played it, I would imagine.
Well, and that's the thing. I couldn't find my copy, so I had to put a ROM on a flash card, but I never got to play the full thing through, but there was the European version got a little more content than they did on the US version. And it's actually this other thing that was in the Japanese version. It's this little mini, we can talk about this real quick, but it's called Idea Spy. Well, it's 2.5, but it's pronounced Tuhan in Japanese. But it's this really weird little radio play thing. And after a while, they eventually, Hideo Kojima and some other people that worked for Kojima Productions ended up doing an actual podcast radio play of this series. But it was kind of, it's really weird. It's about some guy, and he's a spy that fights against a company that makes these kind of like as seen on TV type things.
Basically, spam all products.
Yeah. So it's just really weird because like they'll just stop and then say the name of a product like it was supposed to be an advertisement for something. And it's kind of, I mean, it's fun, but you basically have to play through the game. I mean, in the European version, you had to play through the game, and then there's like a radio frequency you can call in once per chapter, and then you get the the full story that way. But I thought that was kind of a neat idea, but. We didn't get that in the U.S. for whatever reason.
Yeah,
so.
I wonder what the reasoning behind that was. I watched the whole thing on YouTube, and there's nothing like salacious in there. I mean, if anything, it is a much more like E-rated thing than Ghost Babel.
It's like it's not. Yeah, it's very strange why they didn't do that. I don't know if it was because of time or what, but and. There was some talk about it because the lady that translated the game, she mentioned about that. That was like her favorite part of the game was basically this because it just how weird it was. So I thought that was kind of neat. And it was. I still need to go through and finish the second playthrough to get the full story the real way. But it's kind of, I don't know. Like you were saying though, it's just really weird and
it's very silly.
It's very silly, but I guess it kind of plays into the, there is a spy aspect to Metal Gear, and it's kind of like a weird 60s spy type thing. That's really all I can say about it.
Yeah,
without going into the whole.
It's got a very like goofy, like get smart thing kind of feeling to it, like with the 2.5, the I guess the main character of this thing that you're sort of following his adventures. There's a part where he and another character are stuck in you think the trash compactor in Star Wars, and he pulls out this pull-up bar, this that works for, it's not the product placement thing, but pulls out this pull-up bar thing that it will adjust to any wall, so you can do your pull-ups anywhere to stop the walls from closing in. And then he's like, oh no, it's just adjusting to the walls as they close. So his little brace ended up being for nothing. And then there's a part where he loses the contact, and the contact is actually like this gigantic explosive device that he tricks a tank into running over to blow up the tank. It's like I said, there's a lot of weird, crazy stuff, and it doesn't really add anything as far as like Metal Gear type stuff. It's just a silly little thing to kind of check out, and it's worth it. I wouldn't sit down and watch or this thing all at once on YouTube. I split this up probably over like 2 or 3 days. Like I'd take a few episodes in chunks and just go with that. And because doing this all at once, it's like, because they're about 5 minutes each and at 13 a pop. I mean, it's like, you're looking at like almost a movie that you're sitting through with just looking at a codec screen, which, is almost Metal Gear itself sometimes. But anyway, yeah, that was like I said, I didn't even know about that till you pointed that out to me. So I'm glad you did.
Well, and that's the thing. I didn't find out about that until well after the fact. So it was something that I may never have known about, but found out through. I won't plug them, but no, they there was an interview with the translator, and I won't go into the history on that either. Oh, yeah, but basically, yeah, I thought that was interesting that even was there.
Yeah,
I'm kind of disappointed they didn't do that more with other things. They had like the little hidden songs in Metal Gear Solid 3, but that's about it. I was kind of, and then I guess in 4 you had the podcast that you could get for the iPod, but that was about it. There really wasn't. But I think it would have been kind of cool if they had like a radio drama.
Yeah, I would have liked something like that. I mean, especially like this day and age of podcasts, where a lot of people like play podcasts while they're playing video games. It's like it's a way to keep your attention on the game itself. And
Yeah,
Metal Gear Solid 5 did have the the 80s tapes you could collect, or music tapes you could collect too.
yeah.
So I mean, me personally, like when I ride in on the helicopter, it was just Ride of the Valkyries. I mean, it just felt natural. So a little silly to be sure, but maybe a little, not maybe a little, definitely cliched on my part, but whatever. So, but anyway, yeah, Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel. I almost said Babel, so don't worry about it, Joe.
It's
So,
okay.
yeah, great little game. Definitely recommend it if you want to go through and just see like what Metal Gear can possibly be like on a very very primitive piece of hardware. The MSX was definitely more powerful, but this is, like I said, a nice middle ground of those games, and as far as technology and modern concessions go. So I was very impressed with what they managed to pull off with this. And unfortunately, like they did kind of hint that there might have been a sequel in the works at the end of, or that there was a sequel that they could kind of lean into, where Snake goes off on a mission to, I don't want to say kill, but it sounds like he's going after the politicians that keep using soldiers basically to their own ends and hunt them down. But that sort of like alludes a little bit to Metal Gear Solid, what Metal Gear Solid 2 ended up being about, where Snake sort of becomes like this freelance guy trying to keep Metal Gear basically from ever happening again. So it's like I said, it's these little nods to future games that come up in this thing, is that, and it actually has nothing to do with the series as a whole, is kind of cool. So anyway, Joe, any final thoughts on Metal Gear Ghost Babel?
No, I highly recommend it if you come across it. It's definitely worth playing. It still holds up really well. It's something that I think that if people are into pixel art and everything, I think that this is a really good one to study and take a look at, because of just how intricate the animations are. They did a really great job with very small sprite characters. So I think that this has some of my favorite sprite art on games, because I like little detailed things along those lines. So
Yeah, especially considering the size of these things. Like they did
right.
some really great job with the characters. So, and especially like I said, like the codec stuff, their portraits, it really did cool. And we didn't really talk about this either. I'll bring it up real quick, but like at the Both death scenes, like it's always like sort of like the blacked out shadows of Snake
Right.
and whoever he just killed or whatever, and it's really kind of striking that way. I'm sure it was just maybe easier to animate it that way, but like I think it did a really good job of like kind of portraying like what was going on in the game. There's even one where
Right.
Snake is holding up a gun to, I think Sophie is her name, the general's
Yeah.
right hand. And she's like on her knees, basically waiting for Snake to execute her, and he's just kind of sitting there with the gun pointed to her, and it's just this blue background with them and just kind of black shadows, or just black pixels, and it's really, like you said, it's very striking. So actually, I might use that as if I can dig up a picture of that, I might actually use that as the portrait art for this episode, because yeah, it really kind of struck me as cool. So anyway,
I like that, and my favorite little effect. Well, there's two of them. Was when you fought what was it, Slasher Hawk? You could see two little dots of light on the silhouette for his eyes, and then when he dies, they go black. So I thought that was kind of cool. And at the beginning, there's the laser sights being trained on Snake. That was really cool. I thought that was a neat little.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, like you said, just for sprite work alone, I mean, I think this game is definitely worth playing. I mean, I guess it's story wise, it's a little, even by Metal Gear standards, I think it's a little ridiculous and heavy handed. But yeah, I just like sprite work and gameplay wise, this is a wonderful Game Boy game. So anyway, that'll wrap up this game club. Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at Jason Arriola, and Joe, we can follow you at JoeStar Son.
Yep, JoeStarSan.
All right, great.
Or
All
at
right.
well at. I always hate this at anyway. Whatever.
Yeah, you can follow me at it's just like, yeah, it's a weird Twitter thing, so I don't know. But anyway, yeah, and you guys know what to do with social media for us. If we have 5-star review on iTunes would be nice occasionally. We could really use some of those, get some exposure. Or if you don't want to do all that stuff, just tell a friend, recommend to a friend the podcast, because we've gotten a few listeners that way. It's been a big help. So anyway, thanks for listening, and we will talk at you guys next time.